Let's go ahead and bring up the panel number 3, the opponents to Proposition 16. That would be John Geesman, former chair of the California Energy Commission, Paul Hauser, director of Reading Electric Utility, Michael Bocadero, executive director of the Agricultural Energy Consumers Association, and Supervisor Ross Mirkarimi from District 5, the city of San Francisco. Gentlemen, happy to start, please.
I'm John Geesman. You promoted me. I was not the chair. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be heard in opposition to Proposition 16. I delivered my first legislative testimony before your predecessor committees in 1975. In the ensuing 35 years, besides spending 2 decades in the bond markets, I served as the executive director of the California Energy Commission when Jerry Brown was governor, as the chairman of the California Power Exchange during our disastrous experience with incompetent market regulation, as a board member of the Cal ISO when Governor Davis asserted state authority over that body, and as the attorney member of the California Energy Commission from 2002 to 2008, chairing its renewable energy and power plant siting committees. I'm proud to say that we licensed 26 power plants and 1 transmission line during my most recent tenure, the CEC. I'm retired now, but spend much of my volunteer time as the co-chair of the American Council on Renewable Energy, prodding governments around the world to recalibrate their energy policies in order to accelerate the pace of technological change. Never in all of that time or in any of those venues have I seen political activity by a regulated utility so far outside the bounds of acceptable conduct as PG&E's sole sponsorship of the constitutional amendment politely referred to as Proposition 16. I'm mindful of the contempt of the legislative process, reliance on deceptive wording, and resort to strong-arm tactics that are manifest in PG&E's campaign. But today I want to take Proposition 16 at face value and focus your attention on 3 tapeworms that eat away at the internal logic of the measure itself. Tapeworm number 1 is the elimination of customer choice. Who among us in today's economy doesn't recognize that fewer choices mean higher prices? That's true for any commodity. Yet Proposition 16 actually wants to restrict the ability of electricity consumers to buy from anyone other than for-profit monopolies. Has California ever faced a greater need to bring downward competitive pressures on the price of electricity? But PG&E wants to lock its monopoly advantage into the state constitution. Tapeworm number 2 is the mystery of where all of this campaign money is coming from. PG&E says it will spend up to $35 million and insists all of that money will come from its shareholders. You and I know that every nickel that passes through PG&E's books comes from its captive customers. Its regulated utility is the only business PG&E has. The CPUC determines what PG&E's cost of capital should be in order to provide for investment in needed infrastructure. But it sure doesn't set that rate at a level calculated to create a $35 million slush fund for sole-sponsored political adventurism. It ought to be illegal to take ratepayer money and use it politically against ratepayer interests. If PG&E is making an excessive return, it ought to give the money back. Tapeworm number 3 is a serious drafting error in the grandfather clause of Proposition 16. The authors attempted to exempt existing municipal utilities operating within their current territories, but they used an outmoded and unworkable sole provider definition. That means that within the 48 existing munis, every new connection, every new home buyer, every new business would be subject to an election requiring the approval of 2/3 of the voters. That's the kind of drafting mistake the legislative committee process is designed to prevent. 3 tapeworms are enough to kill even the meanest dog, and you ought to do what you can to put this mongrel down. Your colleagues in the Senate who signed on to the Steinberg letter in December had it right. PG&E should acknowledge its mistake, abandon its campaign, and bring whatever grievance it thinks it has back to the legislature for further consideration. Thank you.
Mr. Geesman, did you hear PG&E counter your third tapeworm explanation today?
No, I have not.
So no one seems to be debating the point that you've made there.
I think simply walking through the language in the proposed amendment makes clear that in order to be exempted, an existing municipal utility would have to be able to conclusively prove in court that it is the sole provider within its service territory. Possibly in the 1960s and the 1970s, that was a no-brainer. But in that period of time since, we've had the rise of direct access contracts. We've had the development of third-party owned cogeneration projects. We've had the promotion of solar power purchase agreements. There is not a single municipal utility in this state that could prove conclusively in Superior Court, and there is no centralized database to rely upon. There's not a single utility that could prove in Superior Court that it meets that standard. And as a consequence, someone, and there are some 250,000 of us lawyers licensed in California, so one of us will be able to challenge any new connection, any new home purchaser, any new business connection, anything that involves a new utility account under the terms of this amendment would be subject to an election with a required approval of a 2/3 majority of the voters.
So when I quoted you earlier, it was in appropriate context.
Absolutely.
That any of the several dozen similarly impacted jurisdictions of municipal utility districts such as Anaheim, Burbank, Glendale, Pasadena, or Riverside, your new neighbor isn't going to be getting his electricity turned on until 2/3 of the voters say so. And you stand by that?
I certainly do. And let's say that argument is wrong. Somebody is going to have to go to court if this passes. Someone is going to have to go to court and have it overturned. And as a consequence, you have got an extraordinary chilling effect on the business climate and on the real estate market in those 48 communities.
That was my next question, because I asked that of the LAO, and they didn't want to venture down that path. But this could have serious impacts to the overall California economy, without a doubt.
I don't think there's any question, and I believe that is why the realtors, California Association of Realtors, has opposed this ballot measure. There's no reason why anybody wants to say that, on the other hand. None of the municipal utilities have an interest in calling attention, or the attention of their bondholders, to that particular problem. None of the existing real estate agents have an interest in calling attention to that problem because of the potential chilling effect. But I think that were this the legislative committee process, it's the type of drafting problem that would have been worked out months and months in advance of a bill being considered for final consideration.
I appreciate your support in making that statement. Again, I think it's no small mistake that PG&E did not return to the legislature. They're welcome to a change of opinion, certainly, without a doubt. But that's what this body exists for. That's what this building exists for. It's what this institution exists for. And it's beyond disrespectful. Mr. Geesman, your second tapeworm, the mystery of where the $35 million comes from, you said it ought to be illegal. As an attorney, if you have any suggestions how we could make it so, I'm here to author the bill.
I'll give that some consideration.
Thank you.
Assemblymember Skinner.
Well, my question was going to sort of follow the point that you made about, I did find it kind of alarming that there were no restrictions, or it would appear that there are no restrictions to PG&E using ratepayer funds to, in effect, put on a ballot measure that would then restrict their own ratepayers. And I'm not fully versed in what the different regs or legislation is that might govern that, but are there some restrictions that this expenditure was able to not have to comply? Doesn't fall under, or?
Assemblymember, PG&E would tell you that those are the shareholders' funds. Those aren't ratepayer funds. Those are the shareholders' funds, because they keep that money in one pocket as opposed to the pocket that holds the ratepayer funds. But the Public Utilities Commission establishes rates and a rate of return calculated on PG&E's cost of capital in order to provide for the investment in needed infrastructure, not to create a slush fund for sole-sponsored political campaigns. So if these are the shareholder funds, it would seem that the Public Utilities Commission set PG&E's rate a bit too high. It's $35 million that's not going into the infrastructure improvements that might improve service to Mr. Leno's business. It's $35 million being set aside for a political campaign, which PG&E estimates is about 6 to 9 cents a share. Now, as you know, a number of the public employee unions, CalPERS, CalSTRS, end up owning PG&E stock as part of their indexed portfolios. I've been told that the teachers own about 2 million shares of PG&E stock. If, in fact, they are now a forced contributor to this ballot measure, I would think most of their members, and probably the trustees of CalSTRS, would prefer to see that money spent on dividend rather than campaign contributions to the ballot measure.
Maybe we need a 2/3 vote of the shareholders.